Hello everyone. My name is Tracy Paul. I'm located in Edmonton. It's Treaty 6 territory. I've been working on gender equality, gender mainstreaming for over 20 years. I have a master's degree in the promotion of gender equality from the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. And just as part of the introduction, just to let you know, I have 3 children, 3 boys. My youngest is homesick, so you might hear coughing in the background. And my oldest goes to university and he should be coming home soon. And I don't know if he remembers that I'm doing this, so he might peek his head in and say hi. So if you hear a male voice behind me, that is my son's. Just the joys of working from home. I think post-COVID, we're all quite used to that, but there might be a couple of interruptions. All right, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you and hearing your questions at the end of the presentations. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be on this virtual stage with an amazing group of experts. There's just so much knowledge here. So it's a real honor and a privilege to be able to share this space. As I mentioned, I've been working in the area of gender equality for over 20 years. And, before doing this talk, I actually went back to read my thesis. And, it's I wrote my thesis about 20 years ago. And it's actually was a little bit disheartening because most of what I wrote 20 years ago still applies today. So despite the fact that we've been promoting gender equality for so many years, there's not a single country in the world that has achieved gender equality. It's a testament to the people, I think, also who are continuing to strive for gender equality and, just not giving up at all. So in Canada's been promoting gender equality since around 1995 and is actually a leader in the promotion of gender equality globally. So in 1995, for those of you who are unaware, there was the 4th World Conference on Women that was held in Beijing, and this was a pivotal conference in the world of gender equality. It was at this conference where gender mainstreaming became one of the main strategy for how to implement gender equality. And the United Nations, they define gender equality like this. I'm just going to read this so I get it right, but it's a strategy for making women's and men's concerns and experiences an integral dimension of the design, the implementation, the monitoring, and evaluation of all policies and programs in all political, economic, and social spheres so that women and men benefit equally and equality is not perpetuated. The goal of gender mainstreaming is gender equality. And so that's gender mainstreaming. But before I go on, I also want to talk a little bit about what is gender equality, because there is so much confusion, even amongst gender experts, as to what is gender equality. I hear so often that gender equality is about treating men and women the same. I can assure you, gender equality is not about treating women and men the same. But I can also assure you that gender equality is not about treating women and men differently. CEDAW, back in 1999, defined both of these things as gender equity. Gender equity is the process of being fair to women and men. And sometimes being fair is treating women and men the same. Sometimes we need to say we're all just people and we need to be treated the same, equal pay for equal work, as an example. But sometimes being fair is treating women and men differently. There might be historical reasons why women and men don't have the same experiences. There might be reasons why Indigenous people do not have the same experiences and the same level of equality as non-Indigenous people. And so we need to be treating people a little bit differently, for example, through affirmative action programs. Or I often, again, because I have children, I've used the education system as an example. Every child should have the right to education. But once that's treating them all the same, but once those children enter the classroom, they are all different and they have different learning needs. And so we need to treat them according to their needs. Both of those are equity. So what is equality? What exactly are we talking about when we talk about equality? Equality is removing the barrier. It's the end goal. It's when the different behaviors, the aspirations, the needs of women and men are considered, they're valued, and they're favored equally. Gender equality means that all human beings, regardless of their age, regardless of their race, regardless of their sex, are free to develop their personal abilities and make choices without limitations set by stereotypes, rigid gender roles, or prejudices. So if you can imagine those images that are used all of the time, where you've got the three images, and the first one, everybody's standing on the same box, and the next one, there's a tall person has one box, a medium-sized person has two boxes, and the short person has three boxes. And then there's a third image where the fence is removed. That third image is what we're looking for. That is the goal of gender mainstreaming. And that really is the goal of the Government of Canada. So the Government of Canada has the Feminist International Assistance Policy, where its core action area is to achieve gender equality. And right now, 95% of all government funding and international development is to be directed towards the promotion of gender equality. So that's just so that we're speaking the same language. What is gender equality? What is gender mainstreaming? And what is Canada's role in promoting gender equality? So specifically, Canada wants to eradicate poverty, build a more peaceful world, build a more inclusive world, and support greater prosperity. So those are kind of the four main goals of the Feminist International Assistance Policy. So how do these goals link to gender equality? So let's talk about building a more peaceful world. So what does building a more peaceful world have to do with achieving gender equality? So we know that there's conflict, we know there's war, we know there's unrest, and we know that these impact women and men differently. They impact the rich and the poor differently. They impact people of different races, different classes differently. The ways that people are impacted, it varies based on the context. So some harsh but real examples. In some conflicts in the past, HIV/AIDS was used as a weapon of war. And it was intentionally used against women with the hopes that women would get pregnant and that these women would then get HIV/AIDS, as would their children. And so it was a way to try to erase a specific group of people. It impacted women and men very differently. In general, we have the erosion of basic rights for women, the erosion of rights for the queer community, for people who are a part of the LGBTQ or two-spirited community. We see this often in situations where there's conflicts, where there's a lack of peace. Something else we see in the peace and conflict world is that women are largely excluded from the peace-building process. And yet we have all kinds of evidence that shows that when women are included in the peace-building process, the likelihood of peace being sustained for 2 years or more increases by 20%. The increase of peace lasting for 15 years or more goes up by 35% if women are included. So why do we continue to exclude women from peace processes? So that's one of the questions that Canada is, that's one of the things where Canada is saying, what can we do to get greater equality in those peace processes? Because we want to see results. We want to see lasting peace. Just switching page. In terms of economic benefits, so increasing prosperity in the world. Again, there's all kinds of data, there's all kinds of proof that show that greater equality is good for everyone. And so, for example, we know that if you increase equality in the workforce, it has the possibility of increasing GDP globally and in specific countries. And I've seen percentages, I've seen estimations anywhere from 9% up to 26% of a potential of increase in GDP by just having equality. And yet we don't have it. We continue to have a gender pay gap. And what does that mean? That means that women and men who are working in the exact same positions, or they're working in C-suite jobs, they're not getting paid the same. So on average, the gender pay gap is about 17%. So women make about 17% less than men in the same positions. Racialized women earn even less. And it is like this. There's a gender pay gap from entry-level positions all the way up to those C-suite positions. So again, we're going back to, we have all this proof, we have all this evidence that gender equality is good for everyone. It's good for society, but it's not happening. In addition to this, we need to remember that gender equality is a human rights issue. So we shouldn't even have to talk about the evidence. We're talking about people, and we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about people having the ability to live a life to their maximum potential, whatever that potential is. It should be a human rights issue. It should be obvious, but it is not happening. 20 years after writing my thesis, we still do not have any country in the world that has achieved gender equality. So let me just give you an example, a couple of examples of projects that I've been working on recently, and I think this is part of, you know, the key part of what I want to talk about today. So Canada is promoting gender equality around the world, but who is Canada to do that? Gender equality issues are different from country to country. So can Canada take its idea of what is gender equality and apply that in Afghanistan, apply that in Bolivia, in Mexico, in Thailand? And so how does Canada say, we promote gender equality, we're going to fund projects that promote gender equality, but at the same time, be cognizant of the local context, be cognizant of the realities in those particular places. And you know, personally, I think Canada does a great job of that. So while it has gender equality as this core value, this human right, you'll hear from the other panelists how it actually goes about implementing gender equality varies by country, varies by region, because the contexts vary. And that's one of the strengths of Canada's policy. So an example from a project that I was working on recently through the TAP EDM project was in Mexico. I was working with the Mexican Ministry of Finance, and they wanted to increase, their goal is to increase the number of women in leadership positions. So what does that mean? We go into Mexico and we found a couple of different things. One of them was this patriarchal structure. And so there was a study done by McKinsey. McKinsey went in and they asked Mexicans, in economic downturns, when there's high unemployment, who should have the right to education or to work, men or women? And the majority of people said men. If there's high unemployment, give jobs to men. And why is that? Because there's still this belief in the benevolent breadwinner, that the man is the breadwinner and he should be providing for the family in this benevolent manner. And so men are viewed as more needy and more needing and warranting higher level positions. The other thing that was really interesting was part of the colonial legacy. So in Mexico, they work some of the longest days in the world, for sure in the Western Hemisphere. And so they are working from about 7 o'clock in the morning until 9, 10 o'clock at night. So where does this come from? So they were colonized by Spain. Spain would work these long days, but they would take a 2, 3, 4 hour break in the middle for their meal time, spend time with families, have their siesta. That was adopted by Mexico, but now because of globalization, they're taking a 1 hour work break for lunch, but they're continuing to stay until those long, long hours. How is this impacting people? It's particularly impacting women and women who have children, because they cannot work those hours and be home to cook their children's supper, to take care of their supper if they have preschool children, to get them to and from daycares. And so you're seeing an incredible number of women leaving the workforce. Morag gave me a 2-minute warning, so I just want to very quickly share just one other quick project. Is I'm working on a project in Bolivia right now. Bolivia has a huge focus on their indigenous populations, and I think this is just a beautiful thing. So one of what they're looking at is, and what Canada is allowing them to explore, is how gender equality relates to their indigenous populations, and how colonialism changed the idea of their organization of the indigenous societies. Before the Spanish arrived, the term indigenous didn't exist. And now we have this term, indigenous. And what does even that term need in terms of subjugating people? So as we're going through doing training and gender-based analysis of their policies, we're unpacking the notion of indigenous people and what does that mean in